The Met Police have confirmed that Julian Assange, this is the founder of the controversial Wikileaks website, has been arrested by officers from the Met Police Service. They said on Twitter it was at the Embassy of Ecuador in London on a warrant issued by Westminster Magistrates Court for failing to surrender to the court. That was a warrant issued back in 2012, and of course he's been there ever since. He's been taken into custody at a central London police station where he'll remain before being presented before Westminster Magistrates Court as soon as possible. It says the MPS had a duty to execute the warrant on behalf of Westminster Magistrates Court and was invited into the embassy by the ambassador following the Ecuadorian government's withdrawal of asylum.
We're talking a long historic litany of leaking information that led undoubtedly to the loss of lives, the loss of US troop lives in terms of revealing important information, military information, which enemies could have used, and also the murder of informants and people who were working with US forces in various countries once their identities were, unveiled. That is what he ought to be put on trial for, and but
many people say that they would have been privy to an awful lot of that information beforehand, and that is simply an excuse. What he actually did was he embarrassed governments around the world, and that
No, he didn't. He revealed it all. He put it on his website, and he revealed it all. The identity of informants was not available before Julian Assange and WikiLeaks put them online. Let's not kid ourselves here. He is responsible for those people being murdered. No question. He will say in his defence, and that's for a judge and jury to determine, that he was simply uncovering what was going on. But they had real-life consequences, and he must answer for that.
Yes, but are you seriously saying that extraditing him to the States will not in some way bolster President Trump? That there won't be a political angle to it?
This is not a question of politics. It's a question of justice at the end of the day. Has he committed a crime? That is a question that needs to be resolved by a court. That court will be in the US. That court will be a fair court. If you're suggesting that US justice is corrupt, I'd like to see why you think that.
No, I'm not. I absolutely did not say that US justice is corrupt. I was saying, are you saying... No, what I said was, are you not... No, I was saying, surely you must be able to see that there is a political angle to this as well. I was saying that President Trump's decisions on the extradition will not be entirely to do with justice. They will be political as well.
I think that all US presidents make political decisions. Were he to have been released in President Obama's time, I'm quite certain, given the damage that the leaking of information did to US operations, that they would be, President Obama would also be asking for his extradition.
I went to see him last Friday, and it was really tense. I mean, it's a kind of quite a small embassy. There's no air. I mean, you fall asleep if you're in there about half an hour.
Doesn't he walk on the roof though and stuff like that?
No.
He doesn't get outside ever.
No, I mean, look, you talk about 7 years, but the last year has been particularly tough because the Ecuadorians had a change of government and the new government didn't like him. And look, they cut off his internet. He wasn't allowed many visits. I was one of the few people able to visit. They've got 2 cameras in every room. I mean, everything was monitored. I mean, you can imagine.
And he was covering them up, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, well, he tried to cover them up. Look, there was a kind of cat and mouse game whereby he was trying to assert himself. You can understand that. But look, I mean, the UN, I mean, the highest authority in the world decided that he was arbitrarily detained, which, that means that he wasn't free to leave and he was justifiably an asylum seeker. And I'm very upset by it, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm very sad to see the way he was pulled out. I mean, it's not good. I mean, Julian Assange, he gets up every morning. And as far as he's concerned, he's doing this for us, the public. And therefore I think we should have a bit more empathy for somebody who just because he doesn't necessarily fit in with what the government, what
he's not. Vaughan, he's not particularly well liked by the public, is he? He's a hero of the kind of left-wing lovies who read The Guardian, but I think the majority of people don't really care.
Well, it's interesting because it's also the hard right like him too. I mean, so and I agree people don't care because they've had too much of him. But also, he did bring up in a really important conversation about transparency. How open do we want our government to be? And he's championed that. And I think they've been, what's happening now is vindictive. They want to make an example of him. Rather like the Russians, they come along and they go to Salisbury and they try and top some people. If they annoy them to make an example to discourage others. Well, it looks like to me the Americans just want to stick him in jail for life to try to discourage people from revealing secrets.
Well, Britain has said that if they allow him to go back to America, and remember, of course, that I don't think you can ever extradite an American from America. They just don't permit it. But, of course, Julian Assange is not a British citizen anyway. Why don't we just send him back to Australia?
Well, I heard they might only get 5 years. He might not be charged with the serious crimes, and they might just give him 5 years.
Yes, but no, that's interesting you say that, because what they've actually said is that he helped Bradley Manning, as he was called then in Chelsea, helped him in getting a password.
Password.
We don't know the truth of that. But they can also add charges later if they get him. So look, I mean, I'm not too optimistic for the guy. I feel very sorry for him. He doesn't deserve this.
When you saw him in the embassy, did he confide in you his thoughts about? Did he expect this to happen? Was he prepared for it?
Yes, he's been expecting this for a long while. I mean, literally, when he went and got asylum there, the British tried to were on the verge of breaking into the embassy and then decided not to. It's pretty grim. In one way, for him, I'm pleased. I know this isn't what he wants, but at least in prison he'll get some outside space and he'll get a doctor, and he does need that. But actually, it's not what he wanted, and I just think that he's been violated. I mean, if you give someone asylum, you've got to see it through, haven't you?
In the past, there have been debates around the activity of WikiLeaks, around freedom of the press and freedom of expression, which of course is enshrined in your constitution. Would I be right in thinking, John, that by charging Assange with hacking rather than for publishing classified information, American prosecutors avoid having to directly challenge the press freedoms guaranteed under the First Amendment?
You're 100% correct, Paul. The way it's being reported here today, that they obviously debated that and decided not to, and instead hit them with this one count. I also learned, which is, I'm not a lawyer, but if you extradite a Julian Assange back to the United States, you cannot then, once you get him here, add more charges onto that original charge.
Right.
So we know what it is. It's the one count having to do with Chelsea Manning and the password and stealing state secrets. And that the intelligence community here in the United States wants to nail Assange and put him in jail because it's considered an egregious act over here, as I'm sure it is in Great Britain, too.
Well, I know that under the Obama administration, both the FBI and the CIA argued he was a malicious hacker and information broker. And I think even Democrats are behind this. I mean, this isn't a party political dispute. This is it. Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat in the Senate, had called Assange a direct participant in Russian efforts to undermine the West and a dedicated accomplice in efforts to undermine American security. So it seems that there's a kind of unity on this one, John.
There is, with one funny little exception, which is, videotapes are a funny thing. So are audio tapes. And in the Oval Office today, when the president of South Korea was here, Trump was asked about WikiLeaks, and he played dumb. Oh, I don't know anything about WikiLeaks. But then, of course, all day on the news, they're playing samples from the campaign of Trump saying, I love WikiLeaks and how great they are and so forth. They were a huge factor in the fall of 2016 in publishing stolen Hillary campaign and Democratic National Committee campaign emails. It was a huge issue in the campaign. And Trump and his acolytes like Sean Hannity of Fox News embraced Assange. Now, Assange had been the boogeyman of America up till then. He'd been seen as Putin's puppet. And here along comes the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, and Fox News embracing this guy. And it was sort of the beginning of this crazy upside-down stuff that we're still living with today.
We all know that this is now a judicial process. This is the American justice system demanding the extradition of this man through our justice system. But there is always a political element when it comes to international extradition, isn't there?
Well, there's a very brief political involvement at the start and the end of any extradition process where the Home Secretary has to approve the request and approve the extradition order. But that discretion is extremely limited. So this is ultimately a judicial process from start to finish, and the rules are well established.
I mean, one of the rules, of course, is that we can't extradite anyone to a country where they're going to face the death penalty. We know that's under UK law, it's under EU law, and that certainly isn't the case. However, he's only facing 5 years behind bars in America. Of course, it's a country where you do actually serve the 5 years if you're sentenced to 5 years over basically, for all intents and purposes, computer hacking issues. But we know that the Americans would like to charge him with far more serious crimes that could lead to him being behind bars forever. Once they've got him on American soil, all that changes, doesn't it?
Well, that's impossible for them to do under well-established extradition law. That's something called the rule of specialty, which means very simply you can only be prosecuted for that which you are extradited. And I'm not sure, Julia, that they are obsessed with charging them with lots of other offences. They've had 7 years, remember, to get their offences in order to decide exactly what they're going to charge him with. So this wasn't some sort of penetrating insight on his part that he knew all along they were going to do it, and lo and behold, there is the extradition request when he emerges from the embassy. They've had 7 years to decide, and it's just fairly predictable that they were going to bring one charge forward. And the one they've brought actually is probably the least serious. It's a maximum penalty for 5 years. So the idea that they're desperate to throw the book at him, I just think is simply not true.
Julian Assange published the truth. He published information which exposed American government and military war crimes, human rights abuses, and corruption. And in that sense, he performed a great public service. He published that information in the same way that the New York Times and The Guardian published that information, yet only Julian Assange is being pursued by the Trump administration.
But hold on a minute. He wasn't arrested because of that. He was arrested for being in breach of his bail conditions when he was asked to answer charges in Sweden of rape and sexual assault. That has nothing whatsoever to do with what he did with his work with Wikileaks. This is about accusations of sexual assault.
No, that's not true. As the Prime Minister made clear yesterday in her statement in the House of Commons, he was also arrested in response to an extradition request by the United States to stand trial on charges of having conspired with Chelsea Manning to publish information about US classified documents.
These are the charges. These are the charges related to America. He was actually, his initial charge, what he's actually just been found guilty of, he fled to the embassy because he was going to be extradited to Sweden to face those sexual assault charges.
He was arrested initially because he'd skipped bail. And, of course, that is a crime, and he will face the consequences.
And that was skipping bail on those. This is the difficulty, isn't it? Because you can think he's a freedom fighter. You can, and there's plenty of arguments for that. What he did, that the stuff he published was stuff the public had a right to know, and in fact had a need to know. However, there is also the awkward issue of these sexual assault charges. Now they've been dropped. One of them we think may sort of rear its ugly head again. But that was why. I mean, there's a lot of in the social media world saying, look, this is a man, he's been imprisoned, he's been kept from freedom for the last 7 years. He chose to seek asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy rather than face those charges. If he's so innocent of them, why did he not think he could do the charges? And why did he think that going to Sweden was any worse than being in the UK when both of them have an extradition deal with the United States?
Well, first of all, let me correct you. Julian Assange has never been charged with any sexual offence.
No, because he hasn't even been questioned. Yes, I did say that.
There were allegations, and quite rightly he should face those allegations. He has always been willing to face those allegations. So in 2010, he met the Swedish prosecutors, and they told him there were no charges being pressed. He was free to leave Sweden and to come back to Britain. That's what he did.
Yep.
Then when he returned, some prosecutors, a different set of prosecutors, decided to reopen the charges. And then he said to them, OK, come to Britain and interview me. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Well, no, OK. No, I know that is all the case. However, that's not how it works. And when the police want to question you, you have to turn up. I mean, that's just not how the judicial system works. And people do often reopen cases. And in other scenarios where cases they've been told no question to answer, we're all cheering the fact that they're reopening the case. So, look, I don't know what happened, but, in those circumstances, circumstances. You weren't there, I wasn't there. But the point is, he did resist. I mean, he fled to the Ecuadorian embassy. He did resist being in a situation where we'd have to answer to the questioning and answer to those possible charges. But
no, he made. Sorry, you're completely wrong.
I'm not.
He did make himself available to the Swedish prosecutors. They took 5 years to come to London to interview him, and after interviewing him, they said they were not going to press any charges.
Yes.
But the reason why he did not go to Sweden was because he feared that he would eventually be extradited to the United States to face these very serious charges.
Well, exactly. But this is my point. That was the reason why he didn't. So these things have all got mixed up together. But let's not pretend that that his decision to go into the Ecuadorian embassy was something that was forced upon him. That was his choice. But let's come back to this because time is very short. You think that we shouldn't extradite him? I mean, whether or not we agree with what he did, if he did break the American law when he did that, the accusation of the Americans is that he encouraged Chelsea Manning, as she is now known, to hack the computers and get the password, and that was against the law, that he incited her to do that. If that is the case, should we not extradite him to face those charges?
Absolutely not. He's acting in the same way as Daniel Ellsberg did in the 1970s when he exposed American war crimes in Vietnam and Cambodia. He is acting in the public interest because he's exposing wrongdoing by the U.S. government and military, which had been hidden from the American public. They should have had the right to know. They were denied that right. But thanks to Wikileaks and New York Times and The Guardian and other newspapers around the world, that information was eventually published and the public learned the truth.
And
all that Julian Assange did was publish the truth. And this case against him by the United States government is an attack upon the right to publish.
Okay, let me ask you this though. Given, I mean, the New York Times, The Guardian, Le Monde, they published this information. However, he fell out with all of those. He's pretty much fallen out with anyone he's ever worked with, as far as we can gather. He said they should publish anything and everything. He released these massive, big data dumps around the world. They're concerned. A lot of these journalists, very experienced journalists, strong investigative journalists, doing their job properly, wanted to protect people who might face repercussions in many countries. Whether in America, Russia, in Saudi Arabia, in China, or wherever, and he didn't want to do that. They were concerned that actually what he did put people's lives at risk, including American personnel, British personnel, and others. In which case, he risked life to make his point. Their point was you didn't have to risk life. You could get that information out there, but you could do it in a very careful way where we could expose wrongdoing, but without putting people's lives at risk. And he didn't want to do that. So he does. I mean, some say that he has blood on his hands. Peter Tatchell?
No evidence that anyone has been harmed by any information that WikiLeaks revealed. I'm sure if that had happened, if someone had been harmed, it would have been headlines around the world. That did not happen. Also, Julian Assange did not say to The Guardian, publish whatever you want. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks is a tiny organisation. They did not have the staff and resources to go through millions of pages of documents. They gave the information to the New York Times and The Guardian and other papers and said, you go through it and find the relevant information. That's exactly what those newspapers did. So this idea that he harmed people is complete and utter nonsense.
These claims are from some of the journalists who've worked with him, unfortunately.
It seems to be, once again, like a lot of things in this country, split down sort of party political lines. Are you one of those who agrees with Jeremy Corbyn and says that this guy's a sort of a folk hero, or do you think he broke the law and we should be sending him off to America?
Well, he certainly looks more like a folk hero now. He seems to have changed his visual expression quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, he came out looking like... He went in looking like Del Boy. He came out looking like Uncle Albert.
Well, yeah. I mean, he used to be what you would probably politically incorrect say was quite good looking.
Yeah. Well, right. Exactly.
However, I think we just have to let the legal system take its course.
Yes.
I've opposed in the past certain people being, there have been some terrible cases of where people were being sent back to America to a very different kind of justice system, and I've opposed that. But in this issue, I just feel almost like what you said at the beginning, I don't feel that interested. I can't, but I do feel that as long as our justice system takes its course, and he will have the right to appeal and be heard. And I'm
I think it's right. I think it's right to say as well that you shouldn't be able to avoid the legal process by seeking asylum in a London embassy of a country with which you have had previously no contact.
Well, it all has seemed a bit strange, and that he's been allowed to sort of be there for such a long time. And I just think most people will just think, look, let's get it sorted one way or the other. Let's get him treated. And I mean, I think the whole issue now is whether he did actually give intelligence that was harmful to, both either America or our country. And, I'm really not the person to judge that.
No, sure.